You know that resolution that we all have at the beginning of the year that we're not going to buy as many physical books and that we're going to actually read our TBRs? Yeah, been there, done that, completely failed. Hello everyone, it's Jananie and welcome back to my channel, This Story Ain't Over. Today we are doing a pure and simple book haul. I recently went on a trip to New York City for the launch of the first ever bindery books. The fall season of them, there was 4 of them. I'll talk about them in a second. But that trip was so much fun. I met so many other influencers and tastemakers and booktubers and bookstagrammers and book talkers. And I also met up with some old friends and some new friends. And overall, it was just a fantastic time. And if you're interested in my trip and what I actually did throughout the week and who I met up with and the things that I discussed and all of the behind the scenes of the actual fall launch bindery event, then you can go to my bindery community down below. For the price of a coffee, you can support me and my channel, and you can also get all of this extra exclusive content. Throughout the month, I usually post these little journal entries about what's going on in my life and the details behind what's going on behind the scenes with my publishing imprint, Boundless Press. And on my flight back from New York, I did write a whole journal entry on the entire trip, and I had some pictures in there and got into some of the details. So if you want to see that post, go check out my bindery community down below. I'll also be posting a vlog of my whole trip, so if you want to see that as well, you can check out my bindery community. So now that I'm back from my trip, I'm definitely feeling the effects of not having my regular routine. I also was just super busy for the first few weeks of October and the last week of September. And for those of you who have been following my channel for at least the last couple years, I usually work out every morning, at least during the week, during the 5 work days. And it's definitely something that gives me a peace of mind. I feel like I can conquer my day because I have, deadlifted 200 pounds in the morning and I feel kind of invincible. But given how busy my month was, I definitely wasn't working out as regularly as I usually do. And I think for me, I just need that personalized attention that comes with having a trainer. I used to go to personal training, but this is where the sponsor of today's video, Trainwell, comes in to solve all my problems. Trainwell basically is an app that combines the flexibility of technology and having an app for your workouts with the personalization and accountability that you get from having an actual human expert trainer. On Trainwell, you get a virtual trainer, an actual person who creates these guided workouts that are customized to your specific needs and goals. They can work around your schedules and if you're going through any injuries, and every program that they create is tailored towards you and also continuously adapted. So like I said, with the traveling and all of the busyness of my past month, I feel like I wasn't able to prioritize working out as much as I usually do. And so in those situations, Trainwell would have been perfect because you can work out with them anytime, anywhere, and you also get this customized guided workout. So if you're interested in having a virtual trainer, an actual human that can help you work out and realize your actual goals, whether that is being consistent with your workout or just starting a new workout routine or getting through an injury or being able to work out whenever, wherever, then you should definitely go check out Trainwell. And very luckily for you, using the link in my description, you can actually get a 14-day free trial with a personal trainer on Trainwell. I honestly believe that if you're getting into working out or if you want to be more consistent, working with a personal trainer is the way to go, and Trainwell will make it really easy to do so. With that said, thank you so much to Trainwell for sponsoring today's video, and now let's get into the books on this book haul. So as I mentioned earlier, I went on this New York trip and I went to so many bookstores in New York City. I did buy quite a few books from a lot of them, and then there was a few that I went to that I managed to have some self-control for. But if you do want to hear about all of the bookstores that I went to in New York City, and if you're planning a trip soon, I will be making a full New York City bookstore guide that I will be posting on my bindery community. So if you want to grab that for your next trip to New York City, then you should definitely check out my bindery community, join as a member, and get access to that guide. So the main reason that I went to New York was for this really epic launch event on October 15th for the release of the first 4 inaugural bindery books that were coming out from 4 different tastemakers imprints. If you're new to this whole thing, to bindery and my connection to it, essentially bindery is a startup that is basically Patreon plus publishing. So book influencers or tastemakers have their own communities on bindery, and the people who join them can get extra and exclusive content from those tastemakers and sort of support them in a monetary way. And I'm so deeply grateful for each one of you who is signed up for my bindery community and making all of this possible. But along with the Patreon aspect of bindery, there's also the publishing part. So on bindery, there's a select few tastemakers who are actually also publishers. And each of us has our own micro imprints, and we get to publish books under those imprints that we think our audiences are going to love. So if you didn't know, my imprint is called Boundless Press, and our first ever book that we will be publishing is called Dust Settles North, and it's by Deena ElGenaidi. And I recently revealed the cover for it on Instagram. If you don't follow me there, what are you doing? Because that's where you're going to get the most up-to-date information from me, and also fun tidbits like this. So So we did reveal the cover for Dust Settles North. It looks so gorgeous. I absolutely adore it. Dust Settles North is coming out August 2025. It is a literary fiction and it's written by an Egyptian American author. I love this book with every inch of my heart. It is beautifully written and it tells such a heartbreaking but also uplifting story. And I think perhaps the thing I love the most about it is that it tells a story of actual full-on adults who are still figuring things out and who are still trying to come to terms with their identities. And I think if you are a child of immigrants, if you are an immigrant, if you are someone from a marginalized community, if you've never seen yourself in fiction, I feel like this book did that for me. It felt like a representation of what I've felt being, you know, Canadian, but my parents are from Sri Lanka, and just having that dual identity. I think it really hit that chord for me. I totally went on a tangent here, but essentially the book that I'm publishing, Dust Settles North, is coming out next year, August 2025. If you can go pre-order it now, or if you can even just add it on Goodreads, that's a huge help for me, and I would honestly just appreciate it so much. And excitingly for me and for the author Deena, who I met over the week, she is lovely. I finally got to meet her in person. We've previously only talked over like video call and that kind of thing, but we did meet for coffee. We went to lunch. It was so nice talking to her. And then she also came for the Bindery fall launch, and very excitingly for us, Bindery was able to get a cover spot on PW, which is Publishers Weekly, the magazine, which is essentially a industry magazine for like publishers and publishing professionals. And right here on the front cover, we have Bindery's first 4 books, inaugural season, the fall season of books. And these are the 4 books that came out on October 15th. On the inside cover, there's also more information about Bindery, and then it also shows the 4 tastemakers who published these books. And then on the inside back cover, we have the whole season of spring 2025 books that are coming out next year. And among them, we have, of course, Dust Settles North right there. Ah! If you follow me on Instagram, you probably saw all of my stories and like the Instagram post that I made about the whole week and the event. But being at the event with Deena, the author of the book that I'm publishing, Dust Settles North, and seeing Dust Settles North on the inside cover of PW was just such an exciting moment. And honestly, I feel like we were both freaking out. I was freaking out. And I feel like everything was just starting to become so real for me, especially when we revealed the cover like the week before. That was also super exciting. But like seeing it like in print in like this sort of book mock-up was just so insane. And then of course we have the back cover of PW, which actually has my face on it right there. Look at her. And yeah, it sort of talks about the mission of Bindery, which is building a more diverse, equitable, and independent world of books. With Bindery, we all have our own micro imprints. We are focused on the authors and their books, and each of the tastemakers is marketing those books for the authors. We are doing the promotion for them so that they can just, you know, sit back and focus on the thing that they want to be doing, which is writing. I know some of you have heard me talk about this before, but Bindery's model also allows for a much better royalty rate for the authors. They are making more money than the publisher themselves off of their books, which is usually not the case. In traditional publishing, authors usually get about a 10%, 10 to 12% royalty rate, whereas under the Bindery model, they're getting 50%. I honestly feel like it's such an awesome model, and I'm so excited that I get to be like putting a book that I really believe in out into the world. And the concept of you guys getting to like read it and like love it and potentially even see yourselves in it is just so exciting. I used to work in publishing and it was just such a complicated thing for me. I really hated the way that oftentimes marginalized authors did not get the chances that they deserved. And I think even going through submissions and, you know, going through this process and seeing a book like Deena's book among the pile of books that, you know, hadn't managed to get a traditional publishing deal and were overlooked by traditional publishing, I was just shocked, honestly, because this book is amazing. And I feel like the fact that no one scooped it up earlier is just insane to me because, yeah, it just deserves to be out there and heard and read, and I just hope you guys are excited as I am for this book. So if you want to support me and my imprint and help me publish books from different diverse and marginalized authors, then definitely go check out my Bindery community down below, support all this for the price of a coffee, and also get the full behind the scenes on like the whole process. If you want to hear about the process with Dust Settles North, about acquiring the book, you know, deciding the cover, going through the cover's process, read an excerpt of the book, all of that is on my Bindery feed, and you can go back in time and just go through the whole process with us again. All right, tangent aside, the 4 fall books that came out on October 15th from Bindery and from these 4 tastemakers imprints were actually gifted to me by Bindery during the event. We got these like goodie bags with the PW magazine and also the 4 books. And at the event, I got to like get the books signed from the authors and stamped by the tastemakers. So that was really fun. And so these are the books. Let me tell you about each. So first I have And the Sky Blood by S. Hati. This one is a climate fantasy. It's an adult fantasy and it's also a standalone. So for those of you who can't commit commit to a full-on series, this one is a great way to go. And essentially it's set in this like dying city that is ruled by these colonizers. And we have these three people who are sort of working to discover this hidden cache of magic in order to save the city. Those three characters are a thief, a slumlord, and an heiress. And they have to sort of work together and work on their own to find this hidden cache of magic and save their city. One very cool thing about this one is that part of the like magic system is that the like fossil fuel energy that they are cultivating is from these like blood rains that fall over the city, which is so cool and such an interesting concept. So I am really excited to read this one. I have started it. It was actually part of like the pile of books that I was considering to publish, but the tastemaker who got this book, Zoran from Fantasy and Friends, she got to this book first, she finished it first, and she wanted to offer on it first, so I gracefully backed away, but I'm so excited to actually like finish the book and see where this one goes. Okay, next I have House of Frank by Kay Sinclair. I've actually started reading this one. I started it on the plane home from New York, and this one, oh my god, I am already so obsessed with. I feel like it's gonna be one of those books that's like absolutely heartwarming, but it's also gonna make me cry and sob so hard. And before I tell you about the plot of the book itself, one really cool thing about this one is that the author, Kay Sinclair, actually found Bindery through our Pitch Fest, which is essentially a time during the year when we open up submissions to unagented authors and they can submit their work and the tastemakers can go through that and choose to publish one of those books if they want to. And so Jason from Easy Cat Press found Kay's book in his Pitch Fest submissions and he fell in love with this book and decided to publish it. So it's pretty exciting because like she didn't have an agent, but she was able to get this like really exciting opportunity and I am just so happy for her. But essentially House of Frank is this really cute sort of cozy fantasy. It follows this lonely witch who is sort of consumed by grief because her sister has passed away, and her sister requested on her deathbed that the main character take her ashes to this like magical arboretum. I'm saying that word wrong, but essentially in this place they bury the ashes and from there a beautiful tree will grow. So it's this idea of like the circle of life and it's really beautiful. And so our main character has struggled with the grief of like losing her sister, and it's actually taken her 2 years to actually head out to the House of Frank to get these ashes buried. But luckily for our main character, the lonely witch Saika, she ends up encountering this beautiful cast of characters at the House of Frank, including Frank himself, who is like this mythical beast with like horns and he's like huge, but he wears like cardigans and he's like a absolute fluff ball. And she meets him and she meets the other cast of characters and she also meets another witch that she potentially may be falling for. I'm very early on in the book, but I can already see the seeds of something coming, and I've heard that this has a really beautiful sapphic romance in it. And not only that, Kay is also a Black author and the main character as well as the love interest are also Black women, so that was really exciting to me when I found out. So just so excited for this. It seems like it's gonna be so cute. And I feel like if you were looking for Black queer representation in a book, then this one's definitely one to pick up because it's a lovely, fun, heartwarming, cozy fantasy. All right, the third bindery book that came out is Strange Beasts by Susan J. Morris. This is by a queer author and it involves a sapphic romance as well. But beyond that, and more importantly, this one is actually a gothic tale. It's part historical fantasy, part mystery, and it sort of draws inspiration from Dracula and also Sherlock Holmes, which is such an interesting and fun combo. And also the fact that this is gothic has me super hyped. I love gothic books, and I also feel like gothic books are just so suited towards like repressed sapphic feelings. If you've read The Haunting of Hill House, you know. So I feel like this one's gonna be really fantastic and I am really excited to pick it up. All right, and then the final bindery book that came out this fall is Inferno's Heir by Tiffany Wang. This is the first book of a duology, I believe, and this is a YA fantasy and it follows an outcast princess who joins the rebellion against her own kingdom and family. And beyond the political fantasy aspect of the book, the main character also has control over like certain elements, including fire, which not only makes her a formidable opponent, but it also makes her an outcast. I'm really excited to read this one. It's giving me like Zuko vibes from Avatar: The Last Airbender, like the way that he ends up betraying the Fire Nation towards the end to, you know, go on the good side. And I'm also just obsessed with this cover. I love how it looks like a playing card and it's like kind of reversible. Super cool. Okay, so those were the 4 bindery books. I'm really excited to dive into them and get further into House of Frank specifically. But next, I have a couple books that were sent to me by a publisher, and that was Soho Press. And they sent me 2 of their new horror releases, which I was super excited for spooky season. I absolutely love October and Halloween and all of that. So I am starting to get into like my spooky books of the year, which I am just loving. So the first of those 2 books is Youth Juice by E.K. Sathu. This one reminds me a lot of Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Huang, which was one of my favorite books of last year. It's an absolutely fantastic horror novel, but this one seems very similar to me because it follows a main character who starts working for this like luxury skincare, wellness, beauty brand. And they're a company actually based in New York in like the Soho neighborhood. And our main character is a 30-something who's feeling a bit aimless in life, but she ends up working for this company, searching for some meaning in her life, and she starts using one of their like really big famous products, which is Youth Juice. But of course, there's some horror element to this, so I think things are gonna go wrong from there. And this is very much like Natural Beauty, I think, because it's a similar situation. The main character works for this beauty brand. She starts using the beauty products, and there's something very sinister going on. So my hope is that it'll be just as good as Natural Beauty, but you know, we cannot compare, so we'll see. And then the other book that they sent me is The Night of Baba Yaga, and this is by Akira Otani, and it's actually translated from Japanese. The book is set in Tokyo in 1979, and it follows a main character who finds herself getting embroiled with the Yakuza in a bad way, and she finds herself having to become the bodyguard and driver of the gang boss's daughter, the sheltered daughter that doesn't really know what's going on. From what I've heard, this also has a queer love story to it, so I am just overall super hyped. I'm really intrigued to see what happens, and I feel like it's a concept that I've never really read. All right, next I have two more categories of books. I have some books that I bought in Toronto before my trip to New York, and then I also have a bunch of books that I bought on the trip in New York. So among the books that I bought in Toronto, the first one that I have is Enter Ghost by Isabel Hamad. Isabella Hamad is a Palestinian British author, and so is the main character in the book. But this one essentially follows a main character who is an actress. She's done a lot of theater, and she's essentially going through this like lull in her career, and she doesn't know what she wants in life, and she's been divorced, she's a bit older, and she finds herself returning to Palestine to visit her sister in Haifa. And there she finds herself roped into a new production of Hamlet, where she'll be playing Gertrude. The title of the book, Enter Ghost, is actually one of the stage directions from Hamlet, so that's also pretty interesting. I personally really love books that have any sort of relation to Shakespeare, like they retell one of the plays, or they're marginally like inspired by one of the Shakespeare plays. But of course, I'm also really excited to read this one because it's by a Palestinian author. But beyond that, this book is also the October book club pick for my book club, the Boundless Book Club. If you don't follow it on Instagram, go follow it there so you can get full updates on what we're reading and when we're reading things. But to join the book club, which is absolutely free and totally virtual, you can go download the Fable app, and that's where we host the book club. It's really nice because Fable has like these little chat rooms for each chapter of the book so that you can discuss the book without spoiling anyone. And it's also got an interactive like e-reader on the app. So if you buy the book on the app and read it on the app, you can also see like where I've highlighted parts of the book and like little comments that I've left or other people in the club have left. And so it becomes a social reading experience, which I think is just so much fun. So if you want to read Enter Ghost with me and my club of like over 3,000 people, go use the link in my description. That also helps me out when you use the link in my description to join the book club. Go join there and we can discuss the book more on Fable. All right, this next book is one that I honestly can't believe I actually bought. It was a little bit on a whim, but I did have this book years ago and I decided to unhaul it. Like I returned it because I had heard that it felt a bit like trauma porn. There was just too much suffering going on, and that was particularly from like a couple reviews that I had seen. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna unhaul this. I don't think it's worth reading. However, recently I feel like my perspective on this has changed, and I've seen a lot of other people who have reviewed this book that have really loved it and that see it as a favorite, and I happen to have like very similar tastes to those people. And so I was like, maybe I just need to see for myself. So that book is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This book is like so freaking popular, and all I really know about it is that it is set in New York City, and I think the element of me going to New York also had a factor into me buying this because I was like, ooh, maybe I'll read this in New York, a book about New York. And then I didn't take it with me because look at it, it is so big and massive and thick. But yeah, all I really know about this one is that it follows 4 college classmates and they're in New York and they go through some really like hard and devastating things. And most people that I've talked to who have read this and actually liked it have said that, you know, they were heartbroken by it, that they were crying the entire time, but they still loved it. Like it was still one of their favorites, or that it was one of the books that stuck out in their brain. And I feel like oftentimes those are the types of books that I love. So yeah, I was like, you know what, maybe I just need to give it a try myself and see where it takes me. I did sort of flip through the book, and I feel like the author's writing style is something that I would like. It seemed really beautiful. And overall, I feel like I'm just gonna read this for the plot, just see where it takes me. If you have read A Little Life before, Please let me know your thoughts, and please let me know if you think I, in particular, would like it. All right, the next book that I have is Cockroach by Rawi Hage. This book I've honestly seen around so many times before, especially when I was younger, and that's probably because the author is Canadian. He's Lebanese, but he's also Canadian, and so obviously growing up in Canada, I saw it around a lot, but I never actually picked it up. And I think originally I never decided to pick this one up because I've heard it kind of has like this Franz Kafka-esque, vibe to it, like metamorphosis type vibe to it. But essentially this book is set in Montreal's like vibrant sort of immigrant community. And we're meeting our main character after he has a failed suicide attempt and he's forced to see a therapist and has to confront his childhood in his war-torn country, Lebanon, and also look at his life in Montreal amongst these other immigrants. And then this next part, which I don't know if it's actually him thinking this or if it's just like a metaphor, the fact that he's imagining this, but he imagines himself to be a cockroach invading the lives of the privileged but willfully blind citizens who surround him. I do feel like it's still going to give me that Kafka-esque vibe, but regardless, I'm intrigued and I feel like this is a perspective that I've never really read from, so I'm excited to check it out. All right, and then from the same bookstore, I ended up grabbing a couple nonfictions that I'd been meaning to read for a while, and I was like, you know what, let me just grab the physical copies because I feel like I can put tabs and sort of write notes and sort of engage with the text a little bit more deeply. So those books are The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. I've actually read parts of this for a class in university. English was one of my majors and I did a lot of like post-colonial studies type seminar classes, and this one definitely came up, and I did want to read like the whole thing at some point, but I just never got around to it. So I feel like this one's going to be interesting and I'm excited to dive into it. And then on a very similar note, I have The Question of Palestine by Edward W. Said. This is the same author of Orientalism, and I feel like this is one of his like lesser known works. I feel like people always talk about Orientalism, but they don't actually talk about this one or his other works. So I'm curious to see his perspective in this one. I have read parts of Orientalism as well before, and I do intend to grab a physical copy of it at some point. I just saw these two at the bookstore and I was like, you know what, let me grab them. If you have read this one or Wretched of the Earth, let me know what you thought of them and what parts you found intriguing. Okay, and then the last book that I grabbed before I went to New York was The Coin by Yasmin Zaher. This book is a very new release and it's by a Palestinian American author. And the concept of this book sounds absolutely ridiculous and like outrageous, and I feel like I'm gonna love it for that reason. It's giving me just such chaotic vibes, like kind of like I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel, and that's basically my favorite type of book to read. So I was like, let me grab the physical copy. But essentially this book follows a wealthy Palestinian woman, but it says in the description that her inheritance is inaccessible for some reason, and she's in New York teaching at the school for underprivileged boys, where her eccentric methods start to cross boundaries. Very intrigued to see what that means. But the kicker for this book and the actual premise that like immediately sucked me in was that the main character befriends this homeless swindler and they start this like intercontinental scheme to resell Birkin bags. Absolutely wild, like such a ridiculous concept and so strange, but also I'm so intrigued, like I want to know. It's a fairly short book, so I feel like it's going to pack a punch, and I'm just excited to see where it goes. Like I feel like it could be a new favorite. If you have read The Coin, let me know what you thought of it without spoiling, of course, because I am just really intrigued. All right, on to the books that I grabbed in New York City. So I'll tell you which bookstore I got each of these from. So starting with the first three books that I grabbed from the Strand bookstore. The Strand is like this really big bookstore in New York City. It's pretty old from what I know, and it is a bookstore that actually sells both new and used books. The bookstore is huge and like there's so many aisles, and I actually like went through so many of them just like seeing if there was anything that piqued my interest, or if there was like a special edition of something or like an old edition of something that I'd be like interested in grabbing. Though I was only able to explore like one level, I think, because I didn't have time to do the other ones. So I do want to do the other ones at some point, but it was like the second or third time that I'd been to the Strand. But I feel like this time I had more time to just like actually look at more books and just like chill there. But the three books that I did end up getting were older books, and they were used, and they were some nice editions that I liked, and they were pretty good deals as well. So the first of the books that I got is Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri. I've been meaning to read this author's books for a while. She's a South Asian author, but she also writes in Italian and English, and she's like very cool. But this book seems to be like one of those sort of like literary fictions with like aimlessness and absolutely zero plot, which I felt like I was gonna love. And it sort of talks about the like loneliness of being in a city and sort of being in solitude, which I found interesting. I saw it at another bookstore, but I was like, I feel like I can get this for cheaper and used from the Strand. and I found it, and I did. And then the other two books that I got from the Strand were both by Toni Morrison. So I have Sula, and it's this really beautiful like edition, which I think is just gorgeous. I feel like the newer editions are nice, but like they're kind of boring. So I loved having the like illustration of the woman on the front of this. Toni Morrison is an author that I've been meaning to get into for a while. I own a couple of her other books, but I did not own this one, and I've heard really great things about it. So I was like, let me grab it, add it to the collection, and it's also a cool copy. And then the other Toni Morrison book that I grabbed was Jazz, and I just loved this cover. I thought it was so cool. Like, I just love the colors and the vibe and the illustrations. I feel like covers these days for classics can be very, very boring, and this just seemed way more interesting. So after the Strand bookstore, I did end up going to McNally Jackson, and I went to the Soho location. This was like a day or two after, and I grabbed quite a few books. One thing that I really liked about McNally Jackson was the fact that they organize their books by like country of origin, like where the author is from, and not necessarily country. Actually, they do it like kind of by region sometimes. So there's like American books, British, Canadian, but then there's also like Middle Eastern literature, South Asian literature, Southeast Asian. However, at the front of the bookstore, they do have like those tables with staff picks and then also books that have recently come out. And funnily enough, the week that I went to New York was the week of the release, I think the week of the release of Recognizing the Stranger on Palestine and Narrative by Isabella Hamad. This is a very tiny little book that has the lecture that Isabella Hamad did, I think in October 2023, or like a week before that. And it was a speech that she gave before the Edward Said Memorial Lecture at Columbia University. As the title suggests, it's about Palestine and narrative. And I'm really excited to read this one. I feel like I've been seeing Isabella Hamad like quoted in different places, like on Twitter and etc. in different dialogues, so I think it's gonna be interesting. And then speaking of Palestine, I also grabbed this collection of poems called Forest of Noise, and it's by Mosab Abu Toha. And these are several poems by the Palestinian author amid the current crisis and genocide going on, and I feel like it's going to be really heartbreaking and also just very relevant to the moment and moving, and I'm excited to hear from this voice. All right, and then the other two books that I grabbed from McNally Jackson Soho were these two books that were in the Middle Eastern section, and it's funny because I was looking at these books to potentially put them as the book club pick for my book club, The Boundless Book Club, because I wanted to feature a book by a Lebanese author. However, as I was trying to like look for physical copies of some of these books, like I couldn't find them anywhere near me and in any of the independent bookstores in Toronto. So I got really lucky with McNally Jackson because of the way it's like organized and like the super wide selection that they have. They happen to have physical copies of these two books. So the first of those books is Beirut Blues by Hanan Al-Sheikh. This book follows a woman who is sort of like lamenting the way that her beloved city, Beirut, has been sort of torn apart by the civil war. And so the book is like a series of letters that she's like writing to friends and loved ones and talking about the city. And I do think that this one's going to be a heartbreaker. A lot of the praise quotes talk about how, you know, visceral and like heartbreaking the book is, but it's also been described as like the tracks in a blues album about the gruesome juxtapositions and absurdities of life under siege. I think it's going to be a book with like some very powerful sort of imagery and moments as well, so I'm excited to read it. And then the other book that I grabbed was An Unnecessary Woman by Rabi Alameddin. This book ended up being one of the options that I gave to my book club to vote on for the October pick. They ended up going with Enter Ghost, but this was also like a close second. And I can see why, because the concept seems really interesting. Essentially, the book follows our main character, who is a 72-year-old woman who is a bit of a shut-in. Like, she's a super introvert. She doesn't really go outside anymore, but she is a book-loving person. She's very obsessive, and she's leading this sort of like shuttered life. Now, as we follow her, we are starting to see into her past, and especially her past as it relates to the Lebanese Civil War. We start to see how the events of her past have shaped her life and created her into the person she is. Overall, I feel like this book and the other one are going to give me like a really interesting look into Lebanon and like Beirut as well, so I'm excited to pick up both. Okay, at last we're on to the last couple books, and this is from the last bookstore that I went to, and that was The Ripped Bodice, a romance bookstore, as you can see here. I absolutely loved this bookstore. I think it was my favorite out of all of them, just because of the decor of the bookstore, like the look of it, the vibe, and also the fact that it was a romance only bookstore, which is just so cool. They do have some other books that are not romance related at the back of the store if you're just looking for something general, but I do feel like the rest of the store is very like romance focused, and intentionally so. And the Ripped Bodice in New York, which is actually in Brooklyn, is actually the second location for the Ripped Bodice. The original location, I believe, is in LA. So it was really nice to see this new bookstore because I don't think it was there when when I last went to New York. So overall, really exciting, and I did get a couple books. So the first of these books is one that I usually wouldn't pick up. It is a self-published book, which was something I noticed the bookstore in general had quite a few like indie published books, which is pretty cool. I feel like usual bookstores don't carry many of those, so that was a nice thing to see. And actually the two books that I did grab were both indie published books, but this one I feel like is not something I would usually pick up. It was like in the monsters and demon sort of section of the store, like romances with that type of thing, and I was a little intrigued. I feel like this is a bit out of my comfort zone, but I'm intrigued to see how it goes. Obviously it's got a bit of smut too, but that book is Sweet Vengeance by Viano Oniomo. This is a book by a Black author. The main character is Black as well. Basically the book follows like this woman named Joy and then this demon named Malachi, and he is making this deal with this mortal to stay in the mortal realm, and she is making a deal with him to get revenge on the man who hurt her. And of course between this deal they start to lust for each other, and you know, it's like a demon mortal romance, so we'll see how this goes. If you've heard of this book or if you've actually read it before, let me know what you thought of it because I am intrigued. All right, and then the next book that I grabbed from The Ripped Bodice, and the final book on this whole book haul, is The Roommate Risk by Talia Hibbert. Talia Hibbert is like an author that I absolutely adore. She wrote the Brown Sisters trilogy, which was essentially like this trilogy of books with Black female main characters living their life and doing their best and like being awesome. But each of the books was like a different sister from the same family, the Brown sisters. And each of those romances was honestly like really amazing. The second one and the third one in particular were my favorites. And I think I just really love the way that Talia Hibbert writes her romance, but also like her smut scenes too. And so when I saw one of her indie published books at The Ripped Bodice, I was like, okay, I need to get this because I feel like I've been wanting to read Talia Hibbert's other books. And I was like, let's start with this one. This book, as you can probably guess, involves a roommate situation. The main character has like this plumbing situation that comes up and she's like temporarily homeless. And so she moves in with one of her longtime best friends, Rahul. And of course, our lovely male lead has been pining after our main character for many years. And he's, you know, got these rules to make sure that it never goes beyond their friendship and like ruins it. But of course, things are gonna get messy when they're living together and there's a romance that's gonna bloom there. I'm really excited for this one because I feel like it's gonna be so much fun and just like the perfect pick-me-up read. So cannot wait. All right, with that said, those are all of the books on this book haul. I feel like I've accumulated a really nice variety of books this time around, from like smutty romances to like nonfiction to literary fiction to just like weird books with like reselling Birkin bags. Super cool and very interesting, and I'm just excited to dive into all of these. But I would love it if you guys can let me know down below if you're planning to read any of these books, and if you have read them, what did you think of them? Let me know your thoughts down below without spoiling, of course, and that'll help me, of course, like figure out what I want to read next. And as always, thank you so much to my Bindery members for supporting me and my channel and making all of this possible. Again, if you want to see your name on this list, then definitely go join my Bindery community down below. For the price of a coffee, you can support me and my channel, and also my publishing imprint, Boundless Press. And if you would like to do me a really incredible favor, I would love it if you can go check out Dust Settles North by Deena ElGenaidi, the book that my imprint is publishing next year in August. If you can go pre-order it now, or if you can even just add it on Goodreads, that's a huge help for me, and I would honestly just appreciate it so much. All right, that's all I have to say. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. So please remember that this story ain't over. Bye.